Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be watching or working in this new topsy-turvy world. I'm very happy to host this video which will walk you through the various steps that you need to take to create an interactive dashboard. Let's look at the steps in detail. Firstly, check the data types in the columns in your table or data set. A table is preferable. They must be consistent. There is a link to a training video on how to format your tables below this video. Check that there are no blank rows or columns. If there are, delete them. Decide which pivot table fields you want for the dashboard. Then create the pivot tables and charts. Don't format the charts just yet. Meaningfully name the worksheets containing the pivot tables and the charts. That makes them easier, of course, to find. Then create a new worksheet and call it Dashboard and drag it to the far left, so it's the first worksheet. Click the first pivot table sheet and copy or cut the chart. Click the dashboard sheet and paste the chart. Repeat for the other pivot tables and charts. Then format the charts on the dashboard as per the instructions that I'll be showing you, and finally create the slices and format them. To create a pivot table and chart, simply click in a cell in the data, choose the Insert command, Pivot Table. Accept the defaults, and there is your pivot table. And now we'll choose the fields. We'll say the last name and the sales price. And there is my pivot table, and now I can insert a chart, pivot chart, accept the default for the time being and click OK. That is how you create a pivot table and chart. It's very, very simple. Don't format the chart at this stage. We'll do that once we send it across to the dashboard. Notice at the bottom of the screen that I have created 4 pivot tables, 2 of which have been named Count. What I did there to create a count of the sales, for example, this one, I right-clicked on a cell in the pivot table and then said show summarize values by, and I simply said count, and that is what Excel. The state sales, I did the same thing. I right-clicked and summarized the values by count. With my pivot tables and charts created, I'm now going to add a new sheet by clicking the plus and rename it Dashboard and drag it across to the left. I've now done a little bit of initial formatting by clicking the View command and unticking the grid lines, and then going to the Home tab after clicking in a cell A1 and Control A, and I chose a colour. I chose the blue to fill the entire screen. To place the charts onto the dashboard, I simply clicked on the first sheet tab, right-clicked on the chart and copied. I then went to the dashboard, and at a cell I right-clicked and pasted. Then I repeated that exercise for the other sheets. And there at this stage is my dashboard. So we've performed the first 9 steps according to our step chart earlier in the video. The dashboard looks a little bit messy at the moment, so it's time to do some formatting. The first thing I'm going to do is to make the charts all the same size, and I can do this all at the one time by clicking in the top right hand corner for the first chart to select it, hold down the control key and click in the top right hand corner of the other charts. Then go to the shape format and choose in the size group, let's say 6 centimeters in height, and we'll say 11 centimeters, press enter for the width. And there I see that the charts are all the same size. With the charts selected, I'm going to drag them all down a little bit so that I have room at the top to insert a text box and type a title a little later. Now click away to deselect. Now let's align the top 3 charts. Click in the first one to select it, control key down, second one, third one, then go to shape format and align, and we want to align the bottom so that they all match evenly, and then align again, and we will distribute horizontally. There they are, all evenly distributed and with their bottoms also even. Click away to deselect. Now the next formatting step involves handling each chart individually. Notice that when I select the chart in the right hand corner that I'm given 2 command buttons. One is the chart elements, which allows me to add or subtract various elements, and the other is the style button. Let's look at the elements first, because this allows me, for example, to add a chart title. And when I add a chart title, I'm going to click in the chart title area and simply click a title. I've called this chart Representative Sales. After typing the title, I click away and I'm going to drag this over to the left hand corner. Thus, I then go to the next chart and choose chart title and repeat the performance. And I now see that each of my charts has a title. Let's look further at the elements in the first chart. So I'm going to click in the right hand corner and choose the elements button, and this time I'm going to add data labels to the series, and because I've added data labels I can delete the legend over here on the left. And with the chart selected, now I can look at the styles, and what I want to do is find a style that I like, and I'll look at this one. That looks rather neat. I can delete the legend again, thus, and there is my rather nicer looking chart. We'll now look at the second chart by clicking in the top right hand corner. Choose the elements. I don't want the grid lines, but I would like the data labels. And again I go to the styles and I'll choose the same style that I did for the previous chart. And so my dashboard is taking shape rather nicely. I'll delete the legend. We don't need that. And we've now performed the same operation on the other 2 charts. I now look at my chart in the bottom left hand corner, the count of state sales, and I see that it's out of alignment with the one above. So I'm going to click in that chart, control key down, select that one, go to the shape format and align center, and that puts the 2 charts in alignment. Let's look at a couple of formatting changes that I've made. I clicked in a chart to select, and then in the chart options I scroll to the bottom and put a tick in rounded corners, and that was why we see the rounded corners in each chart. I then inserted a text box, drew it on the screen, typed my text, dragged the text box over to the left, changed the font colour to white and made it larger. I then, in the text box, I right clicked and said Format Shape. And what I did then, I increased the transparency to 100%. And when I clicked away, I saw my title showing nicely. It's now time to jump into the chart formatting deep end. I look at the charts and think, can I make them look better and more interesting? The first chart I'm going to work on is the representative count of sales. I've selected it and I'm going to change the chart type because I feel this chart may look better as a bar chart. So I'll choose bar and click OK. Yes, I'm quite happy with that. Let's look at the next chart. And this one I'm going to select the data. And I'm going to switch the rows and columns. And choose OK. And that looks a little more colourful. And I just need to add the legends by clicking on the chart elements and choose legend. And there I see that the legends appear down the right. I don't need the word total, so I'm going to click on that and delete it. The count of state sales is the next victim. I've selected it and I'm going to change the chart type because I feel this one might look better as a pie chart. So I'll choose the pie chart, click OK, and yes, that looks quite reasonable to me. I need a legend so I know what's what, and in the chart elements choose the legend. So there we are. I've changed the appearance of a number of the charts and I'm quite happy with this so far. Prior to creating our slices, I moved the count of state sales up into this position. I've also distributed them horizontally with a smaller gap between the charts. I'm now in a position where I can insert my slices. A slicer is simply a means by which I can filter information in a chart. To insert a slicer, click on the chart to select it, then go to the Insert command and over in the Filters group choose Slicer. That creates a slicer. Then choose a field, we'll say last name because I want to filter by last name, and then click OK and your slicer is created. Drag it down under the relevant chart. Notice that the slicer by default is in a row format. The problem is that at its default size it only showed me 8 of the representatives. I would have to drag down to see Mr. Suyama. There is a solution. With the slicer selected, I see the slicer command where I can change the row to columns. I'm going to create 5 columns. And what that does, that enables me now to resize, drag across where I see the names of each of the representatives, and it's taking up much less space from a row point of view on the screen. I'll do the same now with the representative count of sales. We'll insert a slicer. There's my slicer, and I want the last names again, and I'll click OK and drag the slicer down, with it selected, I make 5 columns, resize, and drag across. Resize widthwise, and there again are my names. I'll now perform the same exercise for the states on the other 2 charts. And there I see my slices all now in column format and looking quite neat on the screen. Let's do a little bit of formatting in the slices. We'll start with the representative sales by right-clicking in this area and go to Slicer Settings. I want the display header not to be last name, but I'm going to type representative. And I'm going to put a tick in hide items with no data. You'll see the reason for this when we format the state charts. I'll click OK. Notice representative now, and I can do the same thing with the second chart. Now we can see that when I inserted the pivot table rows for the states, that there were 2 grayed states. That's because those states were in the pivot tables, but there was no data. So what I'm going to do is to right click, Slicer Settings. State is fine for display header, but I want to put a tick in hide items with no data. Now I'll click OK, and there I see that they have disappeared. And I'll do the same with this particular pivot slicer as well. Hide items with no data. There we are. Now my slices have all been formatted as I need and want to see them. So this would be a good time for us to recap what we have learned to date. First of all, I showed you, if you were a beginner, how to create a pivot table and chart. We learned how to create a dashboard sheet and copy and paste the charts from the pivot tables onto that sheet. We looked at resizing and aligning the charts themselves. We then looked at using the buttons that appeared when I selected the chart, that is the elements and styles buttons. And then we learned how to create and format slices. Now let's go back to the data sheet itself, and the reason for this is that I want to create a pivot table and chart so that I can see the sales by years. And when I do there, I click in a cell, we'll say in the order date, and then I insert a pivot table, select the default, and because I've selected a date, the pivot table shows me years and quarters. I want to see by the years, and I want to see the sales price. Then I want to create a chart by inserting a chart, pivot chart, and there is my pivot chart. Now what I'm going to do is to click OK, and of course right click and copy that chart, go back to the dashboard, and at a cell right click and paste. We can now do our formatting. So the first thing I'm going to do is to type a title up here in the top of the chart. I've called it Sales by Years. I'll then select the chart and look at what's available to me in the chart elements. And I can see already that I have the axes here, but I'm particularly going to look at the chart type, because I figure that this might be better as a pie chart because there are only 3 series. So having selected the chart, I'm going to go to the design and change the chart type and make it a pie chart. I'll accept that one for the time being and click OK. And there's my pie chart, sales by years. Now I can look at the elements and say I want to see the data labels for the amounts involved, and I want to see a legend as well, so that I know which year is which here in the legend. Then I'll look at the style and find a style which matches the ones above. It looks like that one at the time being. That's quite close, and I'm quite happy with that. So there is my chart, suitably formatted. The next step is to add the slices to the chart. So I'm going to go up to Insert and add a slicer, and I just want to have the years, and I'll click OK. There is my slicer. We'll drag up to there, drop that down under the chart, and you'll recall previously that with the slicer selected I could go to the slicer command and add 3 columns, one for each year. Now I'll right click on the slicer, heading and slicer settings, hide items with no data, and click OK. I'm happy with the caption. Now all I need to do is to resize that slicer so that it fits nicely under the chart. We'll drag it across to the left, and notice that this chart is a different size to the others. So for the sake of having everything the same, I'll click in the chart and I'll go to Format, and we'll make the height 6 and the depth 11. And when I press enter, that is what happens. Now I can drag the slicer up again to around about there, and there is my sales by years with the slicer. We'll test the slicer by filtering to year 2019, and there it works beautifully. I'll untick the filter button, clear the filter, and I see that my pie chart is working beautifully. As your dashboard grows in size with the number of charts and other information, it can be advantageous to think about the view itself. So what I'm going to do is click on the View command up here and look in the Show group, and I'm going to tick off some of the information that shows. I don't need the formula bar, I don't need the row and column headings, and I'll make sure the grid lines are ticked off as well. Then when I click in a cell, I can hold down the Control key and press F1 and hide the ribbon. Now if I use any of these commands up here again, then the ribbon will reappear, or I can press Control F1 to bring it back as well. Control F1 is simply a toggle switch to show the ribbon or unshow it. So I'm going to click on View in this case and go to the Zoom command. By default we've been working in a 100% magnification. I'm going to chop that down to 75%, or a figure lower than 100. I can change it here to a custom number and click OK. And there I notice that my dashboard looks rather cleaner and neater, and I've done all that by looking at the View command up here in the command bar. Now the last thing I'd like to show you is some of the absolute magic of pivot tables, charts and dashboards. And that is, you'll recall that I mentioned in the initial steps that we were going to take that it was preferable to have your data in the form of a table. The beauty about that is that if I add data to the table or amend data in the table and then refresh the data, the dashboard items will automatically update. Now you'll notice down at the bottom in the last row of this particular table, I've added a salesperson, John Brown, who has sold 1,000 pies worth $2,500 in the state of Utah. Now what I'm going to do is to go back to the dashboard, and I'd like to say in the data tab, refresh all. And when I click refresh all, that is exactly what happens. All of the data has been updated automatically for me. I didn't have to do anything other than data refresh all. I'm just going to resize this slicer for similarity's sake, just like the ones above. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our learning in how to create a dashboard. I do hope you found it useful and can use it. Remember, you can choose any chart types that you like. It's entirely up to you. And if you've enjoyed the upload, please subscribe, and a like and a comment would be very much appreciated. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.